My life as a 19-year-old on a dairy farm was simple, predictable, until one ordinary morning, a missed step changed everything, plunging me into an experience beyond anything I could have imagined. My heart stopped, and the world I knew dissolved, replaced by a landscape so alien it defied description. What happens when the very rhythm of life ceases and you find yourself standing on the edge of an unknown reality?
Welcome back to a truly unique and profound journey. Today, we're diving into Clive's incredible near-death experience, a raw, unfiltered glimpse beyond our known reality. If these stories resonate, please subscribe and like this video. For today's question, what's one profound experience, big or small, that significantly changed your perspective on life? Share it in the comments below. All right, let's get right into Clive's profound experience.
Before that day, life was just life. I was 19, on the cusp of truly figuring things out, convinced the biggest challenges I'd face involved stubborn piglets or a moody cow. Before everything changed, I was just Clive, a 19-year-old kid finding my footing in the world, quite literally on a dairy farm. My days were a rhythm of early mornings and physical labor, milking cows before the sun fully woke up, then tackling whatever tasks the farmer needed done around the sprawling property. I lived a simple, rural life, steeped in the scent of hay, fresh earth, and often less pleasant farm aromas. The nearest town was a small cluster of buildings, and the pace of life there felt a million miles away from the hurried world I saw on television. My hands were calloused, my muscles were strong, and my mind, though young, was already wired for the practicalities of earning my keep. I wasn't a particularly complex character back then. My interests revolved around the outdoors, a bit of tinkering with old farm machinery, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. There was a certain straightforward honesty to farm work that appealed to me. You put in the effort, you saw the results. My routine was my comfort zone, the steady lowing of the cows, the clang of milk pails, the endless cycle of planting and harvesting, birth and growth. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, tangible. Looking back, my childhood felt like a series of small, vivid snapshots. I remember the dizzying joy of climbing the tallest oak on our property, the world stretching out beneath me like a crumpled map, feeling utterly invincible. There was the sting of losing our old farm dog, Rusty, a grief that felt impossibly vast for a small boy, teaching me about the abruptness of absence. And then there were the countless summer evenings spent by the creek, skipping stones, watching the ripples spread, lost in the simple wonder of it all. These moments, both bright and dim, wove together to form the fabric of who I was. I was a generally contented kid, perhaps a little quiet, always observing, soaking in the details of the world around me. Emotionally, I'd describe myself as steady. I wasn't prone to huge swings of mood. There was a subtle undercurrent of something I couldn't quite name, not dissatisfaction, but perhaps a quiet longing for something more, something beyond the fence lines of the farm. I remember moments of profound boredom, staring at the endless fields, wondering if this was all there was. But these were fleeting. Mostly, there was a quiet appreciation for the small joys, a perfectly clear sunrise, the taste of a fresh apple, the warmth of a fire on a cold night. I wasn't searching for enlightenment. I was just trying to navigate my way through adolescence, trying to figure out what kind of man I was becoming. When it came to life and death, I was, like most 19-year-olds, largely indifferent to the latter. Death was something that happened to old people, or in tragic news stories, or to animals on the farm, a natural, if sometimes harsh, part of the cycle. It held no great mystery for me. I was raised without strong religious convictions. Agnostic would be the closest label for my beliefs. The idea of an afterlife was a nebulous concept, not something I ever spent much time contemplating. I believed in what I could see, what I could touch. My focus was firmly rooted in the here and now, on the tangible world around me. I certainly never imagined that I would soon come face to face with the thin veil between the two. I remember the crisp morning air, the familiar scent of hay, and the farmer's jovial shout. It was just another ordinary day, until a squealing piglet and a split-second decision brought everything to a grinding, terrifying halt. The day it happened began like any other December morning on the farm. A sharp, almost metallic crispness hung in the air, a precursor to winter. The kind of morning that invigorates you, even if you've been up since before dawn. We'd just finished the morning milking, the rhythmic hum of the machinery now replaced by the clatter of buckets and the contented chewing of the cows. Steam still rose from the warm milk in the vats, mingling with the earthy smells of the barn. The farmer, a gruff but fair man named George, was already planning the next task, his breath misting in the cold. His 13-year-old son, a gangly kid named Tom, was helping out, eager to finish his chores and get to whatever boyhood adventure awaited him. We were gathered near the pig pens, a chaotic chorus of squeals and grunts echoing from within. That morning, a handful of piglets, notorious for their ingenuity, had managed to squeeze through a gap in their fencing. George, with a sigh that suggested this wasn't the first time, called out, "Right, lads, pig wrangling time." It was a familiar drill, often ending in muddy clothes and triumphant laughter. We spread out, trying to corner the agile little creatures. The ground was a churned mix of mud and straw, slick from the morning's activity and a recent drizzle. I spotted a particularly plump piglet darting towards a gap in the far corner. I lunged, my full weight behind the dive, aiming to cut off its escape. In that split second, everything felt normal, a routine farm chore. But I misjudged both the piglet's speed and the treacherous footing. Instead of landing cleanly to block its escape, my feet slipped and I went down hard, stomach first. The impact was brutal, a sudden, crushing blow right to the center of my chest. It felt like being hit by a freight train, knocking the wind clean out of me. Now, it's important to understand a little something about my heart. For a while, I'd been experiencing what felt like occasional missed beats, just a little flutter, a pause, then a stronger thump to compensate. Nothing alarming, or so I'd been told. I'd even had an ECG, a fancy test, that had apparently declared my heart perfectly sound, no problems whatsoever, the doctor had said with a reassuring smile. So despite the odd skip, it was never something I truly worried about. But this blow, this was different. I lay there for a moment, winded, trying to regain my breath, and then I felt it. Not just the normal thumping, but a sickening, erratic rhythm. Thump, thump, pause. Thump, pause, thump. It was all wrong. I pushed myself up onto my haunches, the mud seeping through my overalls, and instinctively reached for my wrist, pressing my fingers against my pulse point. I closed my eyes, concentrating. I could feel the beats, then the alarming gaps. Each missed beat was a little jolt of dread, a silent alarm bell ringing somewhere deep inside me. The air around me, once sharp and invigorating, suddenly felt thick, heavy. The distant sounds of the farm, the clatter, the squeals, faded into a dull drone.
My focus narrowed to that erratic throb beneath my fingertips. The missed beats grew more frequent, the pauses longer. A cold, creeping sensation began to spread through my chest, an unsettling emptiness where a steady beat should have been. I could feel my own growing anxiety, a cold knot tightening in my stomach, battling with the strange, almost detached curiosity about what was happening inside my own body. And then it just stopped. One moment, I felt the faint, desperate flutter. The next, nothing. Absolute stillness. No thump, no pause. Just an unearthing void. My eyes flew open. A peculiar, almost clinical thought formed in my mind, perfectly clear despite the growing haze. My heart has stopped. I don't remember saying it aloud, but apparently I did. I recall a strange, sudden lightheadedness, a sense of falling, not downward, but inward. The ground seemed to tilt, the world blurred, and then the lights went out. The last thing I heard, or perhaps felt, was the sudden rush of air as I collapsed, the sound of my own body hitting the damp earth, a sound I later learned was chillingly familiar to those who had witnessed true death.
One moment, I was plummeting into blackness. The next, I was standing alone on an unfamiliar landscape, bathed in an uncanny light. There was no fear, only an overwhelming sense of calm, contentment, and a profound, insatiable curiosity. The collapse itself felt less like a fall and more like an instantaneous dissolution. There was no jarring impact, no sensation of hitting the ground. One moment, the world of the farm was blurring into darkness. The next, I was simply there, standing, not falling, not floating, but upright, stable, yet utterly devoid of the familiar pull of gravity. My physical body, the one that had just crumpled onto the muddy ground, was gone from my perception. There was no pain, no lingering ache from the blow to my chest, no anxiety about the stopped heart. All of that had vanished, replaced by an astonishing, pervasive sense of peace. It wasn't merely the absence of distress, it was a profound contentment, a feeling of being exactly where I was meant to be, untroubled and utterly at ease. And alongside it, an incredibly vivid, almost palpable curiosity. I was alone. There was no sign of George or Tom, no farm, no familiar landmark. The air around me felt different, cleaner, crisper, as if every particle of existence had been freshly polished. My awareness, too, felt sharper than any waking moment I'd ever known. It was like emerging from a perpetual fog into the clearest morning, where every detail, every nuance was vibrant and amplified. My vision was unbelievably clear, far more acute than my normal eyesight, which even then was starting to need glasses. Everything was sharply defined, the colors rich and deep. My senses felt hyper-aware, absorbing far more information than they ever had in my earthly life. The landscape itself was what truly captured my attention. It wasn't flat, but gently rolling, like ancient hills worn smooth by eons. The ground was a uniform, muted yellow-brown, stretching out to the horizon in every direction. There were no trees, no lush greenery, only low-growing tussocks of what looked like sparse, dry grass. Outcroppings of rock broke through the surface, fractured and weathered, like the exposed bones of the earth. Lichens, also in shades of yellow-brown, clung to these stones, creating intricate patterns. It was utterly alien, yet strangely beautiful in its stark simplicity. Above, the sky was not the familiar blue of home. A thin layer of cloud stretched across it, not thick or stormy, but translucent, diffusing a gentle ambient light. And then I noticed it. On the horizon, the clouds held an odd, unmistakable greenish tinge. I remember wondering, with that pervasive sense of calm curiosity, what could possibly cause green clouds? It was a thought, pure and unburdened by scientific reasoning or earthly worry. The sheer normalcy of such an unusual sight, coupled with my complete lack of fear, was perhaps the most striking aspect of those initial moments. I could move, I understood that I possessed agency, though I never actually tried to take a step. My head and torso were mobile, allowing me to gaze about, taking in the vast, silent expanse. Time in that space held no meaning. 20 or 30 seconds, perhaps longer, I simply existed, observing. There was no sound, not at first, no wind rustling, no distant hum, just a profound, all-encompassing silence that was neither oppressive nor empty, but simply complete. And no other presence. I was utterly alone, yet never felt isolated or lonely. It was a solitude filled with a serene self-sufficiency, a complete absorption in the environment around me. There were no voices, no music, no identifiable sounds emanating from the landscape itself. As I stood there, taking in this impossible new reality, a subtle shift occurred. The freedom of movement, the ability to turn my head and look around, slowly began to recede. It wasn't a painful restriction, more like a gentle, almost imperceptible locking into place. Within a few seconds of this stillness taking hold, the ground directly in front of me, about 8 meters away, began to move. It wasn't an earthquake, not a tremor, but a deliberate, semicircular undulation. The rocky surface started to lift, not crumbling, but rising as if it were a solid, living entity. My initial calm was still dominant, mixed with that powerful curiosity. What was this? The rocks continued to ascend, growing taller, broader. And then, as they fully detached from the ground, I saw them. They were not rocks, not entirely. They were 6 or 7 thick-set, elephant-like beasts, but they were not elephants as I knew them. They had no trunks, no ears, their forms solid and unyielding, as if carved from the very rock of the landscape. Their skin was the same weathered, fractured texture as the exposed stones. Their eyes, if they had them, were obscured by the deep shadows of their massive heads. In that instant, the serene detachment shattered. My mind, which had been so calmly analytical just moments before, was flooded with an overwhelming primal terror. These were not benign presences. Their energy was undeniably aggressive, their appearance menacing. And I was locked in place, utterly unable to move, a helpless spectator to their approach. As one, with a chilling, synchronized intention, they began to walk towards me. Each step was less a walk, more a stomp, heavy and deliberate. The sound of their progress, though I couldn't hear it with my ears, vibrated through my very being, a low, guttural thrum that made the ground feel as if it were shaking beneath me, even though I was no longer connected to a physical body. 4 steps. Each one brought them closer, their massive forms looming larger, their rock-hewn bodies radiating an ancient, unyielding power. The terror intensified with every advance, pure and unadulterated, the calm of moments before utterly obliterated. There was no time for deeper thought, no panoramic review of my life, no comforting light, no communication with benevolent beings. Only the chilling approach of these monstrous earth-born creatures, their purpose unclear but undeniably menacing. My entire being was consumed by the stark, raw fear of their impending arrival. It was a crescendo of dread, a primal scream caught in a voiceless realm, escalating with each heavy, ground-shaking step. The last thing I registered was their immense, shadowed forms filling my vision, their aggressive intent almost a physical force pushing against me.
One moment, primal terror consumed me as those colossal rock-hewn beasts stomped closer. The next, a jolt, a shocking return to pain and suffocating reality. I lashed out, still gripped by the fear of the unknown. The transition back was not a gentle fading, nor a soft re-entry. It was a violent, jarring snap. One moment I was suspended in that alien landscape, frozen in sheer terror as the colossal elephant-like creatures advanced, their stomping vibrations rattling my very essence. The next, with an abruptness that felt like being slammed back into a brick wall, I was back, not gently, but violently. The first sensation was an overwhelming, crushing weight. My chest felt like an anvil had been dropped on it, every breath a desperate, shallow gasp. Pain, sharp and immediate, lanced through my ribs, a brutal contrast to the profound absence of sensation I just experienced. Then came the sounds, muffled at first, then coalescing into frantic whispers and the rhythmic, urgent thud, thud, thud against my chest. My eyes snapped open, but the alien green horizon was gone, replaced by the mottled, worried face of George, the farmer, leaning over me. He was pressing hard, his brow furrowed in concentration. The mud beneath me was cold, wet, real. The air smelled of damp earth and fear. My mind, still reeling from the sudden shift, was a chaotic mess. The terror, the raw, visceral fear from the approaching creatures hadn't dissipated and was still a white-hot ember in my core. My body, reacting purely on instinct, lashed out. My arm shot up, a wild, uncontrolled swing, and connected squarely with George's jaw. He grunted, stumbling back, his face a mixture of shock and pain. The impact sent a fresh wave of agony through my arm, but even that was secondary to the lingering dread. "What in God's name?" I choked, my voice hoarse, foreign, barely a whisper. My first coherent thought was a muddled blend of confusion and a desperate need to escape something that was no longer there. Where were they? The beasts? Had they followed me? The sheer physicality of being alive again was a shock. My muscles felt like lead, my limbs heavy and unresponsive. My chest burned, and a wave of nausea rolled over me, a profound sickness contrasting with the perfect calm I had known just moments before. George, rubbing his jaw, recovered quickly. "He's breathing! He's got a pulse!" he yelled, his voice thick with relief, not anger. Tom, who had been hovering anxiously, let out a choked sob of relief. I could see the genuine terror in their eyes, the exhaustion. George later told me that I had been without a heartbeat and not breathing for between 2.5 to 3 minutes. He'd seen death before, witnessed the final rasping death rattle in his own relatives, and he'd heard it from me. The grim finality he'd expected was broken by my sudden, violent return. My body was a traitor. It was weak, disoriented. Every movement was an effort, every breath a shallow struggle. The sudden assault on my senses, the cold mud, the smells, the frantic voices, was overwhelming after the stark, silent clarity of the other place. I tried to sit up, but my muscles screamed in protest, and a dizzying wave washed over me. George gently but firmly held me down, urging me to stay still. The farmer tried to talk to me, his voice a concerned rumble, but the words were a jumble. My mind kept flickering back to that stark, yellowish-brown landscape, to the rising rocks, to the stomping forms. How could I explain it? How could I articulate the serene calm, the hyper-real clarity, followed by the blinding terror? When I finally managed to croak out something about green clouds and rock elephants, George just looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of bewilderment and perhaps a hint of fear. He exchanged a glance with Tom, a look that clearly said, "He's delirious." I tried again, desperate to convey the profound reality of what I had experienced. My heart stopped, George. I was somewhere else. It was so real. His response was a gentle pat on my shoulder, a dismissive, "Easy now, Clive. You had a bad fall. You're all right now. You just hit your head hard." His attempt to rationalize it, to brush it off as a concussion or delirium, felt like a slap in the face. It diminished the incredible, terrifying truth of what I'd just lived through. It was clear he couldn't believe me. And in that moment, I understood the profound isolation of my experience. How could anyone who hadn't been there truly comprehend? The sheer absurdity of rock beasts in an alien landscape, a heart stopping and then restarting. It defied all logic, all conventional understanding. So, I mostly kept quiet, the words sticking in my throat, the vibrant memory of that other place already beginning to feel like a secret burden.
That experience didn't just change my heartbeat, it reset my entire perception of reality. I stopped chasing what others expected and started simply living, soaking up every vibrant, unpredictable moment. The days immediately following were a blur of recovery. My body ached, my chest still throbbed, and the lingering phantom sensation of those stomping rock creatures made sleep a restless, terrifying affair. But beneath the physical discomfort and the residual fear, a profound shift had begun. It wasn't an epiphany that hit me like a lightning bolt. It was more like a slow, irreversible recalibration of my entire being. The world, which had once seemed so solid and predictable, now felt incredibly fragile, yet simultaneously infused with an unshakable, vibrant intensity. My priorities crumbled and reformed. The endless, repetitive tasks of the farm, which once defined my days, suddenly felt trivial. The pursuit of routine, of fitting into conventional expectations, no longer held any appeal. Before, I was just drifting, letting life happen to me. After, I became acutely aware of the precious, fleeting nature of every breath. I found myself less interested in accumulating things or achieving conventional markers of success. Instead, I craved experiences, authentic connections, moments of pure, unadulterated joy. I stopped worrying so much about what others thought of me, shedding the subtle pressures of conformity that had always been present. This wasn't a conscious decision, it was an innate realignment. I didn't suddenly abandon the farm, but my approach to it changed. It became less of a chore and more of a temporary stage in a much larger play. My relationships didn't drastically change, primarily because I was so young. I didn't suddenly cut ties with anyone, but the depth of connection I sought evolved. I became more present with people, listening more intently, valuing the simple act of shared time. However, the one relationship that truly shifted was my relationship with myself. I was no longer just Clive the farmhand. I was Clive, the one who had seen beyond the veil, who had touched something impossibly real and terrifying. Perhaps the most significant transformation occurred in my worldview. Before, I was agnostic, pragmatic, grounded in the tangible. Death was the end, a biological cessation. But how could I hold on to that belief when I had clearly, undeniably existed beyond my body? That landscape, those green clouds, the overwhelming calm, followed by the pure terror of the creatures, it wasn't a dream, not a hallucination.
It was too vivid, too real, too crisp. My highest level of consciousness during the experience was far beyond anything I'd known in my waking life. It felt more real than reality itself. This experience didn't give me answers about God or an afterlife in a religious sense. I didn't see pearly gates or encounter spiritual guides, but it instilled in me a profound certainty that consciousness is not merely a product of the brain. It exists independently. There is something more, something beyond the physical, a layer of reality that we only glimpse in extraordinary circumstances. It didn't make me religious, but it shattered my skepticism about the non-physical realm. I now believe in an underlying, perhaps multi-layered reality that our everyday senses can't fully perceive. Death for me is no longer an end, but a transition, a doorway, a terrifying one perhaps, but a doorway nonetheless.
I wouldn't say I gained a new mission in the traditional sense, like becoming a spiritual guru or an evangelist for near-death experiences. That wasn't my style. But there was a quiet internal imperative to live authentically. The experience seemed to amplify certain existing traits in me, particularly a casual attitude to life, a deep enjoyment of the present moment. I became less conventional, more inclined to do my own thing rather than be a herd creature. If anything, my purpose became simply to enjoy life, to savor its richness, and to embrace its inherent mystery. This led me to explore new interests, to travel more, to seek out unique experiences that broadened my perspective, always with that underlying appreciation for the preciousness of existence. Integrating this experience back into normal life wasn't without its challenges. The biggest difficulty was the profound isolation of it all. How do you explain an encounter with rock-hewn elephant creatures in an alien landscape to people who haven't experienced anything remotely similar? Most reactions were polite skepticism, a dismissive nod, or a quick change of subject. The farmer's initial rationalization of me hitting my head hard set the tone. There was no widespread understanding of near-death experiences back then, beyond vague pop culture notions. It meant I often kept it to myself, knowing that trying to articulate it would only lead to blank stares or well-meaning attempts to medicate me. This created a sense of being fundamentally different, carrying a secret burden that few could comprehend. I didn't face outright condemnation, but the subtle misunderstanding was isolating enough. It forced me to process it internally, to make sense of it on my own terms. Years later, a pacemaker became a part of my life due to sick sinus syndrome, a very real electrical problem with my heart. It was a tangible, physical validation that my heart had indeed been the issue, reinforcing the reality of the initial cardiac arrest, even if the other side remained a personal, inexplicable journey. Then, about 23 years after the initial incident, something truly remarkable happened, blurring the lines of what I thought I knew about reality even further. I found myself, while asleep, back in that same yellow-brown landscape, bathed in the same uncanny light. The same sparse tussocks, the same fractured rocks, the same greenish tinge on the horizon. And then a figure emerged, walking towards me. It was a good friend who had been dead for a decade. He looked vibrant, happy, utterly at peace. He simply walked up to me, clasped my shoulders with a tangible warmth, and said, "Don't worry about me. I'm doing fine." I was speechless, overwhelmed by the profound reality of his presence. The dream had the exact same hyper-real feel as my initial experience, that same heightened clarity and vibrancy. It was a beautiful, comforting postscript, a validation that the connection, whatever it was still there. So what is the ultimate lesson I carried from that day? It's simple, yet profound. Life is short, incredibly precious,
and brimming with far more mystery than we can ever grasp. That brush with the unknown didn't fill me with fear of death. It filled me with a deeper appreciation for life. I learned that what we perceive as reality is just a sliver of what might truly exist. It gave me a deep-seated appreciation for the moment, for the simple act of breathing, seeing, feeling. It freed me from the need to conform, to be a herd creature. My journey taught me that we are more than just our physical bodies, and that the universe holds secrets far grander and stranger than our philosophies can imagine. Don't waste your precious time chasing shadows or living by someone else's rules. Embrace the now, find your own path, and remember that even in the most ordinary of days, something extraordinary can happen that reshapes everything you thought you knew. And who knows? Perhaps when your own heart skips its final beat, you too will find yourself on a landscape you never imagined, on the very edge of the unknown.
Clive's story is a powerful reminder of the thin veil between life and what lies beyond. His direct encounter with an alien landscape and those terrifying creatures is incredibly vivid and challenges our everyday understanding of reality. If Clive's journey resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more incredible accounts. And for our discussion question related to Clive's experience, Clive describes seeing rock-hewn, elephant-like beasts in the alien landscape. How do you interpret such specific and unusual imagery in an NDE? Do you think it holds symbolic meaning, or is it a direct perception of another reality? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I hope Clive's honest and compelling account sparks deeper reflection for you today.